Right now, the trap is preparing elections in Ukraine. Zelensky is ready for the challenge. Europe is putting the process on hold. So, should we expect elections in Ukraine in 26? All the hellish details are coming up in just a moment. Stay tuned. A brutal revenge on the enemy for strikes on Ukrainian soil. The domestic Sapsan ballistic missiles are already on the hunt. The occupiers are in shock. A coup in the US. Americans are turning away from Trump. Shock in the Senate. Rubio sides with Ukraine. A political Armageddon is sweeping over America. Czechia devastates Russia with a mega missile. Western weaponry is ready to tear the enemy to pieces. A deadly strike force is already on the way. A sensation on the Pokrovsk and Kupiansk fronts. No one expected this. The AFU did it. The Kremlin is in panic. The situation in southern Ukraine has stabilized. The bunker dweller is in shock. All this and more in our program, Hell Point. Trump is once again meddling where he's not wanted. The American president is once again interfering in Ukraine's affairs and speculating about the elections. Zelensky gives a tough response while Europe says a categorical no. The EU reminds everyone that Zelensky is a legitimate and democratically elected president. And new elections are only possible when the conditions of war allow it. The main question is when exactly. More details. Watch right now.
The 47th president of the superpower USA has once again rewarded the storytellers. In a new interview, politician Donald Trump not only surprised with his knowledge of geography, but also with his open pandering to Russian demands. It's not the first time that Trump has voiced the wish to hold presidential elections in Ukraine. Moreover, this question was raised right at the beginning of the 45-minute interview.
Yes, I think a lot of time has passed. All of this isn't going very well. Yes, I believe the time has come. I think now is an important moment to hold elections. They are using the war as an excuse not to hold elections, but I think the Ukrainian people should have that choice. And maybe Zelensky would win. I don't know who would win, but they haven't had elections for a very long time. You know, they often talk about democracy, but at some crucial point it truly stops being a democracy.
In fact, analysts say that Donald Trump played into the hands of the Russian dictator Putin, who constantly accuses the Ukrainian authorities of being illegitimate. The Kremlin has repeatedly demanded this from Kyiv. To hold elections, supposedly only then, according to Moscow, there would be legitimacy, with whom to sign documents about a ceasefire. But as of now, the Russians, through American intermediaries, are only pushing a capitulation plan. The question about elections caught Volodymyr Zelensky in the United Kingdom between meetings with partners. The Ukrainian president admitted to journalists that he is ready to amend national legislation and hold elections during martial law in the country, on the condition that the Americans and Europeans provide the necessary security for this.
Why does Trump threaten us with elections but not Putin? Again, we are ready for elections. Why should we be afraid of elections? We're not afraid. And you, Donald Trump, can you guarantee that not a single missile will land here? Can you guarantee that we won't be shelled while the elections are taking place? That no one will attack us? Or will 30,000 polling stations have to sit in basements for a week or even two under air raid sirens because Russia is shelling us? Take a look at the train station in Festive. The United States says, we held elections during wartime. Well, yes, but that was when the war was in Europe and Britain. On their own territory, the United States never held elections during a war. No elections at all.
According to analysts, the issue of security is the most important one that the Ukrainian authorities should raise with their partners. In addition, how can transparency be ensured under constant shelling and with power outages? In Europe, they were quick to remind Trump that he is forgetting the context, while in Brussels, they understand very well what Russia is doing right next to them.
We have already drawn attention to this issue because these are exceptional times. In my opinion, President Zelensky is a democratically elected leader, and any election should take place when the conditions allow for it.
For the prominent Donald Trump, political analysts note, this is truly the final chance to jump on the very last train to forcefully compel Kyiv to sign a comprehensive agreement with Moscow's government.
Right now is the last moment when the entire active political class is on vacation, and starting in January, the marathon race will begin. With the finish line in the fall, in other words, there really won't be any proper summer break. And that's why right now no one has time for this. Ukraine only appears in the news somewhere between stories about someone being trampled in a supermarket on Black Friday and between the lighting of the Christmas tree at Rockefeller Center, so to speak. That's why they're trying to squeeze the most out of Trump in December. and not let this topic drag into January, because in January, journalists will return, politicians will return, and in January, Trump will start being pushed into a course of action.
In fact, according to experts, Ukrainians need to hold out until the moment when the election race completely engulfs overseas politicians. And only then will the issues of aid and a just peace be able to find more support.
A harsh revenge on the enemy. Zelensky shocked everyone with his statement. Ukrainian Sapsan ballistic missiles are already in action. And let's not forget about the ultra-powerful Flamingos and Neptunes. This weapon is causing sheer hysteria in the Kremlin. What's more, the armed forces of Ukraine are preparing hellish strikes on the rear of the Russian Federation. Precisely, lethally, mercilessly. Details in our report.
Sapsan in action. The armed forces of Ukraine have begun using domestically produced ballistic missiles to strike the enemy.
The exact specifications of the Sapsan missile are not being disclosed, but its deployment by Ukrainian forces will allow them to strike enemy targets, possibly even more effectively than with Attack-MS. Ukrainian missiles have twice the explosive power, fly faster, and have a greater strike radius.
At the very same targets, both indeed. On the territory of the Russian Federation and at legitimate military targets in the occupied territories of Ukraine. This is exclusively the sovereign right of the Ukrainian side.
In addition to Sapsan, the Ukrainian army is also using several other domestically produced missiles against the aggressor country. The president of Ukraine emphasized this.
He says that the Ukrainian side, despite the intensity of strikes on defense industry enterprises, has managed not only to preserve the infrastructure of the military-industrial complex, but also to increase and scale up the production of its own weapons. This corresponds to A, the availability of qualified engineering personnel, and B, sufficient funding for Ukrainian defense industry enterprises, which are capable of scaling up the production of domestically made weapons. Virtually all Ukrainian weapons are made exclusively from Ukrainian components.
Let us recall that in September of this year, Volodymyr Zelensky announced that Ukraine is actively developing long-range weaponry. He stated that the tests were successful and the next stage is the launch of serial production. Earlier, Ukraine began production of Flamingo cruise missiles with a range of up to 3,000 kilometers. On Friday, December 5th, the company Firepoint delivered another batch of cruise missiles to the Ukrainian military. And back in November, the armed forces of Ukraine attacked important targets on Russian territory. Long Neptune missiles were used for the strikes. Also, one of the most important developments has been missile drones such as the armed forces are successfully striking military facilities of the Russian Federation, and oil refineries are also targeted by unmanned systems. It is precisely
the continued and strategic use of Ukrainian military equipment that has effectively and successfully blocked the operation of about 40% of Russian oil refineries. According to the Russian side itself, the losses to the Russian budget are estimated at around $100 billion. But it should be noted that the Ukrainian side does not intend to stop at the results already achieved.
after the start of the full-scale war, Ukraine increased its production of weapons and the implementation of new technologies which are already being used at the front. The volume of domestic weapons production has grown several times over. Thanks to private companies, Ukraine will be able to create innovations in the defense industry and effectively implement them on the battlefield of combat.
Starting from the new year, the Ukrainian defense industry and the defense forces of Ukraine will receive Ukrainian ballistic missiles with a strike range, targets of about 800 kilometers. It should be noted that the project company claims to be developing 2 ballistic missiles with strike ranges of up to 200 and, respectively, up to 800 kilometers.
All of this means that Ukrainian developers have demonstrated the ability to create high-precision weaponry capable of destroying important enemy military targets at great depth.
A coup in the USA. Americans are in shock. Polls show that Trump is not supported. Shock. The Senate is showing its character and opposing Trump's controversial decisions. Even Secretary of State Marco Rubio is trying to pursue a pro-Ukrainian course in peace negotiations. America is on the verge of a major political earthquake.
Chicago, Los Angeles, New York, Boston. In dozens of cities across the U.S., mass protests took place against the peace plan proposed by Washington, which, according to participants, essentially it legitimizes Russian aggression and forces Ukraine to accept Moscow's terms. The American political establishment, which opposes Trump's policies, also joined the mass protests. For example, in Chicago, Michael Quigley, a member of the House of Representatives, joined the protests.
When authoritarian regimes try to erase an entire nation, the world has no right to remain silent. We cannot repeat the mistakes of the past. And we cannot allow Trump to force Ukraine to accept a false peace dictated by Moscow.
Americans are very dissatisfied with Trump's policy toward Ukraine. If the 47th President of the United States began his second term in office with the support of 47% of the population, then due to the peace agreement, or more precisely the effective capitulation of Ukraine, which the White House is trying to force Zelensky to sign, Trump's approval rating has dropped to a historic low. It's not just ordinary Americans who are dissatisfied with the peace plan. The agreement has met with moderate resistance in the Senate, both from Republicans and Democrats.
Putin spent the entire year trying to make President Trump look foolish.
If administration officials are more concerned with appeasing Putin than achieving real peace, then the president should find new advisors.
This capitulation agreement is not suitable for America, Europe, or Ukraine. It was written by Putin and benefits only him.
Trump constantly threatens that the U.S. will withdraw from the negotiations if a peace agreement is not signed in the near future. But in reality, he cannot do this, at least not until the U.S. midterm elections for the House of Representatives and the Senate in November 2026. Because his approval rating is falling and his support is declining. And so Trump won't dare to anger the voters even more.
Donald Trump, the former president of the United States, a prominent businessman and media personality,
Wants a peace deal and wants all the glory to go to him. And anything that doesn't bring personal benefit to the president doesn't interest him. In turn, Secretary of State Marco Rubio stated in a recent interview that he holds a pro-Ukrainian position in the negotiations. He assured that Ukraine has good prospects and that without security guarantees, a peace agreement will not be signed.
Theoretically, if everything is done correctly, in 10 years Ukraine's GDP could surpass Russia's GDP.
Such things are needed to stop the war, to ensure that they are never invaded or attacked again, to protect the long-standing and long-term sovereignty and independence of Ukraine so that they do not become a puppet state. They are truly independent and sovereign, allowing their economy not just to recover but to thrive, turning it into a story of prosperity.
Ordinary Americans are taking to the streets in protest. Senators and congressmen are already speaking out openly. They disagree with the peace deal, and even Trump's closest circle is against making concessions to Moscow. Meanwhile, the 47th president is talking about the need to hold elections in Ukraine. But if he doesn't listen to those around him, he himself might not make it to the end of his presidential term in the U.S.
Lethal force is on the way. The Czech Republic is presenting a mega rocket for Ukraine. Strikes deep inside Russia are guaranteed. The Czechs are entering the war against Russia. Western weaponry is ready to tear the enemy to pieces. All the details are coming up next.
Every voice matters. Join our community, support independent journalism, and help us bring you the truth from Ukraine. Become a member of Ukraine today. Join us now.
The Czech company LPP has developed a new cruise missile called Narwhal. As early as January to February 2026, the narwhal will be tested in combat conditions in Ukraine, and mass production is scheduled to begin in the Czech Republic as early as March.
What else can be said about this missile? If we have a comprehensive combination of advanced cruise missiles, such as the formidable Flamingo, the powerful Narwhal, and various other sophisticated systems, then we are truly prepared. Then I think things won't look too good for the Russians starting from the new year.
Narwhals, as journalists write, Defense Express, is capable of striking at a range of up to 680 kilometers. This would be enough to strike Moscow and the Russian strategic bomber base. Engels, what
is known now? It is now known that this missile will have a range of about 650 to 700 kilometers. It is known that it is about 4 meters long, that its warhead is quite substantial. 4 meters in length, and it has good solid aerodynamics, but its total weight is about 260 kilograms. So the warhead will be about the same as the Shaheds, 40 to 50 kilograms, no more. It is capable of flying, as I said, 680 kilometers, 700 kilometers, and it has its own navigation system, which is not heavily affected by electronic warfare.
Rodim Patrash, co-owner of the Alpipi company, explains that ideally the narwhals should be part of a large ecosystem.
We want to come up with something that will work in a disrupted environment. We will send 10 or 20 of our basic 40-kilogram drones, which will suppress the enemy's air defense. At the same moment, 2 narwhals will quickly fly over them, and above them there will be another pair of invisible ones.
Therefore, considering that the narwhal is part of the system, it can be assumed that along with it, the Ukrainian armed forces may also receive the stealth drone Night Ristel and the MTS drone.
So I'm not surprised that such missiles are appearing. I'm not surprised that they're appearing in the Czech Republic. I'm absolutely not surprised that the private sector is much more effective than state enterprises. And I'm expecting even more missiles, and it will be able to cause a lot of trouble for the Russians, especially since the Czech Republic states that this is a specific ecosystem where there will not only be cruise missiles but also drones.
And while the Czech Republic is preparing to test its missiles in Ukraine, Norway is planning to purchase a ground-launched missile with a range of 500 kilometers.
The European Union says, we will construct a formidable drone wall, and Norway says, I'll certainly make my very own right here, so please don't you worry at all. They'll get theirs done because there are a lot of countries involved and they have a lot of money. And now they've announced this program that they will either develop, purchase, or set up some kind of joint production of medium-range missiles with the aim of being able to reach Murmansk and maybe even Moscow.
Meanwhile, in the EU, the so-called Parade of National has begun. Projects for the production of long-range weapons.
The Netherlands is urging its own developers to provide an alternative to the Tomahawk within 3 months. The range and weight requirements have been announced. That's it. Sweden wants to acquire long-range missiles with a range of 2,000 kilometers against Russia by 2030 because there is an emergency situation. Will it reach Moscow? France wants to develop a ballistic missile with a range of 1,000 kilometers.
Currently, only 3 countries in Europe have real capabilities to strike at distances over 1,000 kilometers. These are Britain, which is armed with American Tomahawks and American ballistic missiles, Trident missiles for submarines. Then there is France, with its own cruise missiles, the MDCN and the M51 ballistic missiles. And Ukraine, with its already operational long-range Neptune and Flamingo missiles. Moreover, among these 3 countries, only Ukraine has real combat experience in using long-range weapons, strikes against Russia. The front is boiling, propaganda fairy tales are shattered against the iron wall of the Ukrainian armed forces. The occupiers are trying to seize all of Donbass, but Ukrainian defenders are turning them to dust. There's a sensation on the Pokrovsk and Kupiansk fronts. The Kremlin is in a panic. The south of Ukraine has been stabilized. The bunker dweller is in shock. What is happening on the front and around it in our review?
Siversk has not been captured, although the situation in the city is difficult.
The Operational Command East has refuted Russian fake news about the capture of the city.
In turn, the Deep State Project reported that Russian occupation forces have intensified their attempts to advance in the Siversk area of Donetsk region. According to experts, the enemy continues to amass infantry near the settlement. The situation also remains difficult in the Pokrovsk area. However, our command reports that the situation has nevertheless improved.
The Russian advance has slowed significantly, and the enemy has lost part of its logistical routes.
The maneuvers carried out by our fighters, which stabilized the front, including getting out of a difficult situation in the area of Sukhi Yar and Lysivka.
Today, the front line has been straightened out, and it is clear that the Russians have failed to achieve any significant changes.
Despite the fact that the enemy is making enormous efforts today to try to advance both in the city center and accordingly in the northern districts of Pokrovsk.
However, they have not succeeded in doing so.
At the same time, a number of analysts are reporting the effective encirclement of the neighboring town of Mirnorad.
According to open sources, the defense forces did have to abandon some positions. However, the occupiers are still unable to close the loop.
And accordingly, the anticipated Cauldron event, which was much discussed, did not ultimately happen. Regarding the situation in Kupiansk, significant leakage in both directions is still entirely possible, but it certainly comes with considerable risk for all involved. We are also seeing continued successes of the armed forces of Ukraine in their ongoing operations.
They have reached such a scale there that they can no longer be denied.
Not even the Z military correspondents can deny them anymore?
In particular, it is reported that Russian troops in the city have already been cut off from the crossing over the Oskil River to the north, through which supplies are delivered. After the crucial and sensitive information meticulously gathered reaches the highest echelons of command, the military command on the ground must then meticulously report the unvarnished reality in comprehensive detail. This must be done irrespective of any significant losses incurred or the temptation to present a more convenient narrative. Conversely, it is indeed noteworthy that some tactical and operational successes of the Russian Federation are openly acknowledged by the Ukrainian command operating within the strategically important Kharkiv region, particularly concerning the intense and ongoing engagements taking place in the embattled city of Vovchansk. The Russian units stationed in this direction have become somewhat exhausted.
Meanwhile, in the south of the country, the front has finally been stabilized.
The alarming news that had been coming from positions in Zaporizhzhia and Dnipropetrovsk in recent weeks seems to have come to an end.
The reserves that managed to reach these directions have completed their tasks and have tied down the Russian assault units.
Today, the Ukrainian defense forces succeeded. On the Zaporizhzhia front in Dnipropetrovsk region, they improved their tactical positions. We are not naming the locations today, but our forces have made progress forward.
Accordingly, these counterattacks are producing results, causing the Russian army to lose momentum, but again, we expect reinforcement with reserves.
At the same time, analysts note that in recent months, against the backdrop of Russia's desperate assaults,
More and more is appearing online.
Videos from the south.
From Russian positions where they openly talk about the price paid to take control of this or that.
A forest belt, also known as a shelter belt or windbreak, is a strip of trees or shrubs planted to protect an area from wind, erosion, and other environmental factors. These linear plantings are strategically designed to provide ecological benefits and often consist of various tree species, creating a diverse and resilient natural barrier.
well, maybe this will finally reach those who are still considering joining the ranks of the Russian armed forces. After all, Russian contract soldiers simply have no other prospects.
That's all for now, and catch more hellish news from the front in our next episode.